Hey guys, Pastor John here. Just wanted to take another moment to do the weekly blog with you. Of course, it's Christmas time, so this week's blog reading will be from Luke 2, and we'll just go right into it. Luke 2, at that time, the Roman Emperor Augustus decreed that a census should be taken throughout the Roman Empire. This was the first census taken when Quirinius was governor of Syria. All returned to their own ancestral towns to register for the census, and because Joseph was a descendant of King David, he had to go to Bethlehem in Judea, David's ancient home. He traveled there from the village of Nazareth in Galilee and took with him Mary, to whom he was engaged, who was now expecting a child. And while they were there, the time came for her baby to be born, and she gave birth to her firstborn son. She wrapped him snugly in strips of cloth and laid him in a manger because there was no lodging available for them. And of course, this is just such a great story for a great time of year. Christmas time can be crazy, chaotic, a little disappointing for some people. It's actually a time of year that's full of expectations. So also it's a time of year that we realize there's a whole lot of things in our life that we can't control. And oftentimes we let that stuff overwhelm us. But the truth is that Christmas is the time of year we should be expectant for God's breakthrough. It's a time of year where we should be looking in insignificant places for God's significance to come into our lives with his power, with his glory, with his grace. And so you could imagine how inconvenient it would be for anybody to have to travel a long distance at their own expense, at their own inconvenience, to be counted for the sole purpose to be taxed. You know, doing that without being pregnant would be hard enough for most. It would cause most of us to have our faith shaken. But thankfully, Mary is different than most. And so her and her husband go to be counted during this census. And because there's no lodging, because of the census, as we know, they can't find a place at an inn to give birth to our Messiah. So they end up giving birth in a stable. And so what you have to understand is this is an incredibly inconvenient situation, but not only is it inconvenient for Mary and every Jew that's participating in the census, it would be a time where the Jewish people would be reminded that they were an oppressed people at the mercies of their enemy. And that's important to understand because that means that not only are people upset because of the inconvenience, but it's also a time where they're remembering, man, we're supposed to be a free, prosperous people thriving underneath the protection and covering of our God, but we're actually an oppressed, occupied people who are being forced and told what to do by an occupying enemy. And so the overall atmosphere and overall disposition of the Jewish people this time of year would be very low in terms of expecting God's goodness, expecting God's glory to break through on the earth. But here's the cool thing. This is exactly when God decided would be the perfect time for Messiah to come into the world, for Jesus, Emmanuel, God with us, to be born. And I think that's an incredibly important illustration. God wants to break through in your family. God wants to break through in your church. He wants to break through in your community. But he's looking for a people who will be expectant for God to break through in insignificant places with his significance. So although things may seem crazy, though things may seem out of control, broken, oppressed, that's the moment God wants to break through with his glory. Here's the thing. The devil is always louder about what he's doing. He has to be an expert marketer because what he's offering has no use to the people he's offering it to. So he's a pro at being loud about the evil that he's doing. And so it's our responsibility to learn not to be influenced by oppression, to learn not to be influenced by pain and brokenness, but to be looking and expectant for the things God is doing. Here's the thing. The reason the enemy is loud is not because he wants you to like what he's doing. He wants you to be distracted by it. Because if you're distracted by what the enemy's doing, that means you're focused on what he's doing. If you're focused on what he's doing, that means your heart is being influenced by what he's doing. If your heart is influenced by what the enemy is doing, that means your actions will follow suit. So what we have to do is to remind ourselves yourself, God wants to break through in our lives. God wants to do something glorious in our lives. Despite what I see, despite what I know, despite what I think, despite what I've been told to expect, I'm expecting the significance of God to break through in insignificant places throughout my life. And what begins to happen is as we make that agreement with heaven in our heart, we begin to break the agreements with hell that we've made, and we begin to lift the weight of oppression off of our lives, and God has permission to break through. See, the sad part about the nativity story is there was only a handful of people who were prepared and expectant for God to break through. Some lowly shepherds and 3 wise men or magi, which would be the equivalent today of maybe 3 research professors at a state college. So not really prestigious people, not important, influential people, just people who are hungry for the things of God despite what they knew about the culture around them. So the same thing stands today. God wants to break through. He's just looking for people who are expecting his breakthrough to come even in the most insignificant places. So I just bless you right now to have a heart that's hungry for the things of God, to not be overwhelmed this time of year with the things that you can't control, that don't make sense. I bless you to be expectant for God to break through with his significance even in insignificant places in your life. I love you all.